Well, the president of Sony Pictures Television Studios, Katherine Pope, has made a mistake, or perhaps not. I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video as she speaks the quiet part out loud about all this woke nonsense in Hollywood. So she did a recent interview with Deadline magazine, and she was asked if the fact that Sony was one of, if not the only major studio without a streaming service was affecting them. Now, there might be a reason for this. Again, that's going to be later on in the video, but here's what she had to say. I think this slim down is hitting everyone, and I think it's forcing all of us to raise our game. I don't feel like we're particularly vulnerable. Well, no, of course they're not vulnerable. They don't have a streaming channel. Again, there's a reason for that. However, it was right after that she let slip what she should have kept to herself. She says, sometimes mandates change. It's heartbreaking and there's nothing really you can do about it. And other times, something is so relevant that they couldn't possibly make a bottom line money decision against it because they just love the show so much. So there it is. She basically admits that studios are putting crap out because it's relevant or they love it despite the fact that it isn't making any money. Now, a little bell must have gone off in her head that say, oh no, investors might be listening to this. So she quickly backtracked by saying, quote, I think we've got to continue to make the shows relevant and important and well produced, with the wink and the nod being well produced equals money. So there it is, an admission from a high-level studio executive of what we've all known, and that's the fact that these studios are making this woke garbage content that is losing money for them, losing money for their stockholders for absolutely no other reason than they believe it's relevant. Please ask them to define what relevant means, and you'll find the answer to be absolutely pathetic. It is not relevant if it's just pushing some particular agenda and losing a ton of money because of the simple equation that none of these studios seem to do. If you're so hung up on putting out your message and doing things that are relevant and you keep losing money, it's a zero-sum game. You will eventually run out of money, so you can't make any more garbage content pushing the agenda that you want to push. Duh, it's that simple. But the fact of Sony not having a streaming channel may be more relevant than you think. So bear with me. I'm going to go over something here that looks like I'm going on a tangent, but just stay tuned. You'll see how it all kind of ties together. So about 15 years ago or so, and I don't remember the exact date, and I couldn't find the exact article, Netflix was sitting on the top of the world, right? They were, for lack of a better term, the only streaming service out there. And they were kicking ass, bringing in billions of dollars, and the CEO at the time was actually smart. So they hired a very, very high-end consulting firm and basically put this question to them. What is going to happen in the next 10 years to our business model? And whatever firm that this was had some pretty awesome people, because what they came back and said is that your streaming platform is so successful that it will invariably lead to major studios starting their own streaming services, A, pulling their content off of your channel to bolster their streaming channel, B. And that is what actually prompted Netflix to get into the original content game. They basically said, yes, that makes 100% sense. We exist only on other people's content. So if they all have their own streaming service and they take things off, we will eventually be left with nothing, or some stragglers, or public domain. So that is actually what prompted Netflix to start doing original content. They were very smart. They went back to that consulting firm and they said, okay, that's great. Give us the 10 years after that. And this is where things get interesting. This is the world that we are living in, not today, but tomorrow or within, say, the next 5 years. Because remember, this was about 15 years ago. They gave them the 10-year plan of all the other streaming services popping up, which is exactly what happened. And then they gave them the following, which would be the next 10 years, which we're kind of smack dab in the middle of. And what they said is this: these multiple streaming services are not a sustainable business model. It's too much competition with too little profit. And that at the end of the 10 years, approximately 5 years from now, there would be a consolidation down to a handful, not one, 2 to 3 at maximum for streaming services. It doesn't take much to say that will most likely be Netflix, unless they just completely shit the bed, Disney, and then probably Amazon, only because they'll continue to throw money at it, and then possibly a third or fourth one that is a amalgamation of all the rest, the Hulus, the HBO Maxes, and whatever else. And I want to make it clear, they were talking about major streaming services. There will always be the niche streaming services such as Shudder for horror or some of the other ones. How does this relate to Sony not having a streaming channel? This would be giving a lot of credit where it was due, and I understand that. But I would like to think that when this report came out, again, it was public knowledge. I read an article on it, so it wasn't sort of internal top secret Netflix stuff. It probably occurred 3 or 4 years after Netflix asked for it, but nonetheless, here's the point. If I'm the head of Sony Studios, I'm saying to myself, okay, look, I have a catalog of films and television. It is not massive. It is not on the level of Disney. I can go ahead and spend, not jokingly, hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion plus over the next 5 years, building a streaming service, paying people with the very, very high probability that it will not survive. And that will not survive thing is a huge deal. When the consolidation comes, if it's Hulu or HBO Max or Warner Brothers, whoever it is, they are going to lose an astronomical amount of money. But they have no choice because they would lose even more if they kept it going. What are all the news stories that we're reading about today? The streaming services haven't figured out how to make money. Some of them, Netflix included, think ads are going to be the answer, but it isn't. You can't put the genie back in the bottle once you've let the genie out. Netflix specifically, trained an audience for well over a decade to pay a certain fee a month and get whatever they want. That's it. And as soon as you enter ads into the equation, it's going to fail. Now, of course, people say, well, wait a minute, Hulu has ads and people buy that to get the not ads all the time. It doesn't mean they're making money, and they're not actually releasing the figures showing how many people are paying against how many aren't, and ultimately, it fundamentally started out that way. But these new big ones, Disney Plus, no ads. Amazon Prime, no ads. Yes, you have to pay for Prime, but that $130 a month or whatever it is in February of 2023 ain't cutting it when you're flushing $1 billion down the toilet with Rings of Power. So that is the reality. That's what's really going on. That's why Sony doesn't have a streaming channel, in my opinion. And that's why she can feel free to maybe say some things that she shouldn't have. I still think it was a bit of a slip, though. What do you guys think? Let's talk about it. Obey your king. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification icon.